Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books Author Reading Series. You can find out about this and all of our author events at www.skylightbooks.com. At our website, you can also browse our inventory as well as order books online. And don't be afraid to follow us on Twitter or even be our friend at facebook.com. If you'd like to talk to a real person, we can be reached at 323-660-1175. Thanks for listening and enjoy.
But tonight we're so happy to have our author here. She's been with us since the beginning. She's always read here. She's been a fixture in the literary scene in Los Angeles for some years now, and Skylight is always proud to host her. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Aimee Bender.
Thank you. Thanks, Noelle, and thank you to Skylight Books. I'm very happy to be here. There's a portion of this book that takes place on Vermont, so it's very fitting, in addition to being, one of the, most best LA independent bookstores by far. So I'm really happy to be here, and thank you all for coming. I know a lot of you. I don't know all of you, but it's really a treat. There are people from all sorts of different places, and there's something very wonderful about that for me. So thank you. All right, and this is the first reading for this book, which is exciting because I have not read it out loud at a reading yet, which is exciting and nerve-wracking. So I'm going to read a little bit of, I'm going to kind of try to do a meld of the first couple chapters because I think that might make more sense in a reading. And I think that's all you need to know. You're all very quiet. That was better. Okay, good. You're there. All right. So, and then I'll have time for a Q&A and whatever and all that after. Okay, so chapter 1. And it'll probably be like a 20-minute-ish amount. It happened for the first time on a Tuesday afternoon. A warm spring day in the flatlands near Hollywood, a light breeze moving east from the ocean and stirring the black-eyed pansy petals newly planted in our flower boxes. My mother was home, baking me a cake. When I tripped up the walkway, she opened the front door before I could knock. "How about a practice round?" she said, leaning past the door frame. She pulled me in for a hello hug, pressing me close to my favorite of her aprons, the worn cotton one trimmed in sketches of twinned red cherries. On the kitchen counter, she'd set out the ingredients: flour bag, sugar box, 2 brown eggs nestled in the grooves between tiles, a yellow block of butter blurring at the edges, a shallow glass bowl of lemon peel. I toured the row. This was the week of my 9th birthday, and it had been a long day at school of cursive lessons, which I hated, and playground yelling about point scoring, and the sunlit kitchen and my warm-eyed mother were welcome arms open. I dipped a finger into the wax baggie of brown sugar crystals, murmured, "Yes, please, yes." She said there was about an hour to go, so I pulled out my spelling booklet. "Can I help?" I asked, spreading out pencils and papers on the vinyl placemats. "Nah," said Mom, whisking the flour and baking soda together. My birthday is in March, and that year it fell during an especially bright spring week, vivid and clear in the narrow residential streets where we live, just a handful of blocks south of Sunset. The night-blooming jasmine that crawled up our neighbor's front gate released its heady scent at dusk, and to the north, the hills rolled charmingly over the horizon, houses tucked into the brown. Soon, daylight savings would arrive, and even at nearly 9, I associated my birthday with the first hint of summer, with the feeling in classrooms of open windows and lighter clothing, and in a few months, no more homework. My hair got lighter in spring, from light brown to nearly blonde, almost like my mother's ponytail tassel. In the neighborhood gardens, the agapanthus plants started to push out their long green robot stems to open up to soft purples and blues. Mom was stirring eggs. She was sifting flour. She had 1 bowl of chocolate icing set aside, another with rainbow sprinkles. A cake challenge like this wasn't a usual afternoon activity. My mother didn't bake all that often, but what she enjoyed most was anything tactile, and this cake was just one in a long line of recent varied hands-on experiments. In the last 6 months, she'd coaxed a strawberry plant into a vine, stitched doilies from vintage lace, and in a burst of motivation installed an oak side door in my brother's bedroom with the help of a hired contractor. She'd been working as an office administrator, but she didn't like copy machines or work shoes or computers. And when my father paid off the last of his law school debt, she asked him if she could take some time off and learn to do more with her hands. "My hands," she told him in the hallway, leaning her hips against his. "My hands have had no lessons in anything." "Anything?" he'd asked, holding tight to those hands. She laughed low. "Anything practical," she said. They were right in the way in the middle of the hall as I was leaping from room to room with the plastic leopard. "Excuse me," I said. He breathed in her hair, the sweet-smelling thickness of it. My father usually agreed with her requests, because stamped in his two-footed stance and jaw was the word provider, and he loved her the way a birdwatcher's heart leaps when he hears the call of the roseate spoonbill, a fluffy pink waiter calling its lilting cuckoo from the mangroves. "Check," says the birdwatcher. "Sure," said my father, tapping a handful of mail against her back. "Rah," said the leopard, heading back to its lair. At the kitchen table, I flipped through my workbook, basking in the clicking sounds of a warming oven. If I felt a hint of anything unsettling, it was like the sun going swiftly under a cloud, only to shine straight seconds later. I knew vaguely that my parents had had an argument the night before, but parents had arguments all the time, at home and on TV. Plus, I was still busily going over the bad point scoring from lunch, called by Eddie Oakley with the freckles, who never called fairly. I read through my spelling booklet. Knack, nick, knot, cartwheel, wheelbarrow, wheelie. At the counter, Mom poured thick yellow batter into a greased cake pan and smoothed the top with the flat end of a pink plastic spatula. She checked the oven temperature, brushed a sweaty strand of hair off her forehead with the knob of her wrist. "Here we go," she said, slipping the cake pan into the oven. When I looked up, she was rubbing her eyelids with the pads of her fingertips. She blew me a kiss and said she was going to lie down for a little bit. "Okay," I nodded. 2 birds bickered outside. In my booklet, I picked the person doing a cartwheel and colored her shoes with red laces, her face a light orange. I made a vow to bounce the ball harder on the playground and to bounce it right into Eddie Oakley's corner. I added some apples to the wheelbarrow, freehand. The room filled with the smell of warming butter and sugar and lemon and eggs. And at 5, the timer buzzed and I pulled out the cake and placed it on the stovetop. The house was quiet. The bowl of icing was right there on the counter, ready to go. And cakes are best when just out of the oven, and I really couldn't possibly wait. So I reached to the side of the cake pan, to the least obvious part, and pulled off a small, warm, spongy chunk of deep gold. Iced it all over with chocolate, popped the whole thing into my mouth. So it goes to chapter 2, and there's a little diversion about the mom, and it goes back to the cake. So I'm just going to go back to the cake. My birthday cake was my mother's latest project because it was not from a mix, but instead built from scratch. The flour, the baking soda, lemon-flavored because at 8 that had been my request. I had developed a strong love for sour. We'd looked through several cookbooks together to find just the right one, and the smell in the kitchen was overpoweringly pleasant. To be clear, the bite I ate was delicious. Warm, citrus-baked batter lightness enfolded by cool, deep, dark, swirled sugar. But the day was darkening outside, and as I finished that first bite, as the first impression faded, I felt a subtle shift inside, an unexpected reaction. As if a sensor, so far buried deep inside me, raised its scope to scan around, alerting my mouth to something new. Because the goodness of the ingredients, the fine chocolate, the freshest lemons, seemed like a cover over something larger and darker, and the taste of what was underneath was beginning to push up from the bite. I could absolutely taste the chocolate, but in drifts and traces, in an unfurling or an opening, It seemed that my mouth was also filling with the taste of smallness, the sensation of shrinking, of upset. Tasting a distance I somehow knew was connected to my mother, tasting a crowded sense of her thinking, a spiral, like I could almost even taste the grit in her jaw that had created the headache that meant she had to take as many aspirins as were necessary. A white dotted line of them in a row on the nightstand, like an ellipsis to her comment, "I'm just going to lie down." None of it was a bad taste so much, but there was a kind of lack of wholeness to the flavors that made it taste hollow, like the lemon and chocolate were just surrounding a hollowness. My mother's able hands had made the cake, and her mind had known how to balance the ingredients, but she was not there in it. It so scared me that I took a knife from a drawer and cut out a big slice, ruining the circle, because I had to check again right that second, and I put it on a pink-flowered plate and grabbed a napkin from the napkin drawer. My heart was beating fast. Eddie Oakley shrank to a pinpoint. I was hoping I'd imagined it. Maybe it was a bad lemon or old sugar, although I knew even as I thought it that what I'd tasted had nothing to do with ingredients. And I flipped on the light and took the plate in the other room to my favorite chair, the one with the orange stripe pattern. And with each bite, I thought, so good, the best ever, yum. But in each bite, absence, hunger, spiraling, hollows. This cake that my mother had made just for me, her daughter, whom she loved so much I could see her clench her fists from overflow sometimes when I came home from school. And when she would hug me hello, I could feel how inadequate the hug was for how much she wanted to give. I ate the whole piece, desperate to prove myself wrong. When Mom got up after 6, she wandered into the kitchen and saw the slice taken out of the cake and found me slumped at the foot of the orange-striped chair. She knelt down and smoothed the hot hair off my forehead. "Rosie," she said, "sweets, you all right?" I blinked open eyes, with eyelids heavier now, like tiny lead weights had been strung fishing line style onto each lash. "I ate a slice of cake," I said. She smiled at me. I could still see the headache in her, pulsing in her left eyebrow, but the smile was real. "That's okay," she said, rubbing the underside of her eye bone. "How'd it turn out?" "Fine," I said, but my voice wavered. She went and got herself a piece and sat down with me on the floor, crossing her legs, sheet lines pressed into her cheek from the nap. She said, taking a small bite. "Do you think it's too sweet?" I could feel the mountain swelling in my throat, an ache spreading into the lining of my neck. "What is it, baby?" she asked. "I don't know. Joe home from school yet?" "Not yet." "What's wrong? Are you crying? Did something happen at school?" "Did you and Dad have a fight?" I asked. "Not really," she said, wiping her mouth with my napkin. "Just a discussion. You don't have to worry about that." "Are you okay?" I said. "Me?" "You," I said, sitting up more. She shrugged. "Sure," she said. "I just needed a nap." "Why?" I shook my head clear. "I thought..." She raised her eyebrows, encouraging. "It tastes empty," I said. "The cake?" She laughed a little, startled. "Is it that bad? Did I miss an ingredient?" "No," I said, "not like that. Like you were away. You feel okay?" I kept shaking my head, the words, stupid words, which made no sense. "I'm here," she said brightly. "I feel fine." "More?" She held out a forkful, all sunshine and cocoa, but I could not possibly eat it. I swallowed, and with effort the spit slid around the mountain in my throat. "I guess I shouldn't spoil my dinner," I said. Only then, and only for a second, did she look at me oddly. "Funny kid," she said. She patted her fingers on the napkin and stood. "Well then, shall we get started?" "Dinner?" I said. "Chicken," she said, checking her watch. "It's late." I followed her into the kitchen. Joseph showed up about 10 minutes later. This is her brother. The thud of his backpack on the floor like an anvil had dropped from the ceiling. He was flushed from the walk home, gray eyes clear, dark hair dampened with sweat, and the red in his cheeks and brightness in his eyes made it seem like he would want to tell us all about his day, with high-flying anecdotes and jokes and ribbings. Instead, he washed his hands at the kitchen sink, silent. He seemed to gather air around him in a cloak. Mom hugged him like he'd been gone for a year, and he patted her shoulder like she was a puppy. And together the three of us chopped and cleaned while she made breaded chicken breast with green beans and rice. Joseph sprayed diluted bleach on the cutting board in the sink. Oil crackled in the fry pan. I tried to push my mind back to thinking about school, but the anxiety kicked in for me about halfway through the preparation. As I watched my mother roll raw chicken in breadcrumbs, I thought, what if I tasted in the chicken, too? The rice? At 6:45, my father's car drove up and parked. He pushed the door open, jovial, bellowing, "I'm home," as he usually did. He said it to the hallway. By the end of the day, his hair, black and thick, was matted and rumpled, having taken the hit for all the work worry in his hands. He paused at the kitchen door, but we were all too busy to run to greet him. "Look at the team go," he said. "Hi, Dad," I said, waving a knife back. He always seemed a little like a guest to me. "Welcome home." "Glad to be home," he said. Mom glanced up from her fry pan and nodded. He looked like he might want to come in and kiss her, but wasn't sure if it would work. So instead, he lined up his briefcase against the closet wall, vanished down the hall to change, and joined us as we sat down with the food surrounding steaming in bowls and platters. Joseph began serving himself, and as slowly as I could, I put everything on my plate in even spoonfuls. Half a chicken breast, 7 green beans, 2 helpings of rice. It was dark outside by now. Street lamps buzzed on with their vague blue fluorescence. The dinner taste was a little better than the cakes, but just barely. I sank down into my chair. I pulled at my mouth. "What is it?" Mom asked. "I don't know," I said, holding onto her sleeve. "The chicken tastes weird." Mom chewed thoughtfully. "The breadcrumbs," she said. "Is there too much rosemary?" "Oh, it's fine," said Joseph, who ate with his eyes on the dish so no one could get eye contact and actually talk to him. As we ate, my brother told a little about the after-school astronomy program and how a cosmologist from UCLA would be visiting soon to explain universe acceleration. "Right this minute," said Joseph. "It's just getting faster and faster." He indicated with his fork, and a fleck of rice flew across the table. Dad told a story about his secretary's dog. Mom pulled her chicken into threads. When we were done, she brought the iced, finished, half-sliced cake out on a yellow china plate and made a little flourish with her hands. "And for dessert," she said. Joseph clapped, and Dad mmm'd, and because I didn't know what to do, I forced my way through another slice, wiping at the tears with my napkin. "Sorry," I mumbled, "sorry. Maybe I'm sick?" I watched each of their plates carefully, but Dad's piece was gone in a flash, and even Joseph, who never liked much about food in the first place, and talked often about how he wished there was a breakfast pill, a lunch pill, and a dinner pill, said Mom should enter it in a contest or something. "You're the only person I know who can build doors and cakes and organize the computer files," he said, glancing up for 2 seconds. "Rose thought I missed a part," Mom said. "I didn't say that," I said, clutching my plate, cake gummy and bad in my mouth. "No way," said Joe. "It's complete." "Thank you," she said, blushing. "We all have different tastes, honey," she said, rubbing my hair. "It's not what I meant," I said. "Mom, anyway, it's the last cake for a while. I'll be starting a part-time job tomorrow," Mom said, "with a carpentry shop in Silver Lake." "First I've heard of that," Dad said, wiping his mouth. "What are you fixing, more doors?" I said carpenter, Mom said, "not handyman. I will be making tables and chairs." "May I be excused?" I asked. "Of course," Mom said. "I'll check on you in a minute." I took a bath by myself and went to bed. I felt her come by later as I was dozing off, her standing by my bed, the depth of a shadow of a person felt behind closed eyelids. "Sweet dreams, sweet Rose," she whispered, and I held on to those words like they were a thread of gold I could follow into blackness. Clinging to them tightly, I fell asleep. Thanks. Thank you. So, thank you very much. I would be happy to answer questions if you have questions.
What happens next? What happens next? That's a great question. Yeah.
Bye. buy the book. Yes. Yes, sir.
I like the dialogue. You can make that into a screenplay.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you like it. Thank you.
I cheated and was reading while waiting before you began. I was intrigued to listen to you read what I'd read previously.
Thank you.
I'm really struck by the lack of quotation marks.
Yeah.
And yet it still works. I had no trouble discerning between her inner monologue and she's actually conversing. And I say hats off.
Thank you.
It's quite a trick.
This is the lack of quotation marks for those of you that can't hear. But yeah, I like how it looks too. I think depending on the story or the chapter, some stories feel like quotation marks make sense, and this one it definitely didn't. I think because the inner and
You were doing that before. Is this?
I've done it in some stories. Yeah. No, I have. It's kind of my. Well, thank you. Yes, please.
How was writing this book similar to writing your last books, or not similar at all?
All right, good question. So how is writing it similar or different than the last books? It was both similar and different. I will say about novels that they say, there's this saying, if you write a novel, then you learn how to write a novel, and the next novel is much easier because you know how to write a novel. So that was not at all true. And ended up being very irritating because then I felt like, why is this not, in fact, harder? It's not. I feel no authority about novel writing from writing one before. And then I started another one which didn't work, and then I started another one which is half done, and then I started this one. So... but there was something about there's something, and this is abstract, but I'm going to try to think of a way to talk about it. But there's something about the way I'm thinking about language that is starting to shift little by little, or like sometimes in certain stories, like story The Ring and Flammable Skirt, about a robber, and it's about and I just really like the word robber, and that word led me into the story. And it didn't feel like there was a word that led me into the story in the same way, so that the language was kind of stretching a little bit, and it felt like the scenes had to stretch, and I had to stay with scenes longer than I've ever done before, which was a little bit agonizing because I wanted to leave the scenes, and then I would, and then they'd be there the next day, would be the same scene. And so there's something about that kind of, I don't know what that would be. Tempo, thank you. Patience, tempo, that felt different. And I do feel like novel writing requires a different kind of patience than story writing. And then now, after having written this novel, then I go back to stories, and then I feel like they feel awkward too. So it's like you have your jeans, and then you wash them, and then they feel good, and then you wear them, and they're too loose. It's like that with novels and stories. So it's like, where's the novella or something? Yeah.
Talk about that more, about what the difference is, having written stories and novels.
Yeah. Yeah, they feel really different. I mean, the thing I think about a story, particularly because I write some very, very short stories, so then I can sit down and write the story in one sitting, and it's 3 pages. And then I go back and revise it, but there is something about that story that I know about it and can hold in my head at that moment. And with a novel, the thing, and I felt this with An Invisible Sign of My Own as well, but with this one too, it just, the pain in the ass about novel writing and the thrill is that I can't hold it in my head as a thing for years. So it has to be this kind of diffuse, messy, it's like dots on a map, and then suddenly you see a shape, but I'm wandering and I'm cutting pages and I don't know where to go. So all of that feels like there's then a moment where I start to get a sense of maybe what is the book. And that is extremely different than story writing for me, because I just feel like with stories I just know a lot sooner. And if I can't hold it in my head with a story, I get bored of it and I put it aside. But with a novel, I feel like I'm kind of in for the long haul. Yeah, I mean, in terms of, she was saying about to get to the end and then go back to the beginning, I don't write it in a linear way, so then I'll just be writing scenes, and then other scenes, and then other scenes. And then this book, like that part I read, the first kind of chunk of about 80 pages, I did write as a linear chunk. And then I was stuck. I felt like, okay, that's 80 pages. It's clearly not done, I don't know where to go. And so then I had to wait it out, and then I would wander. And then there are things like the ending of the book that I don't even remember when I wrote the ending of the book, but then later when I looked at that moment, I thought, oh, that's the ending of the book. But so there's lots of pages that get cut, hundreds and hundreds of pages that get cut. Yeah, Cecil.
So you were saying before that you had a couple of false starts with novels that you thought. When did you know that this particular idea or this particular story was a longer piece rather than a story?
You know, what's strange is that even with the ones that I got stuck, they still felt like novels. They just felt kind of uncontained. In that same way that a story, I'll kind of feel the arc of it. Maybe I'll just feel the movement in it, and then it'll end. And then I'll be like, it's a story, because it ended at 20 pages. Boom, or it ended at 2 pages. Whew. But so for the other novels, and it was like I have tons and tons and tons of pages, but there was like a narrative block. Something wasn't moving. And I think moving literally, not in the like I moved, but moving as in there was not a forward motion. And in this one, I think I felt like there was forward motion, even though I wasn't sure exactly where it was going to go. I felt a kind of push, but I didn't know what that was. And I mean, what's interesting is, so I spent 5 years on a novel. It was a teenage boy narrator, did not work, but it was 2 siblings were in it. And then I wrote this book. It's from the point of view of the girl, and she has a brother. And my editor at Doubleday said that he thought I rewrote it, that it was the old novel, but I just had switched people. And I hadn't even thought that, but it was kind of nice because it felt like all that work. It was just laying foundation. It was all purposeful. Yes?
It sounds like she's a rather astute 9-year-old, and I'm just curious kind of how you went with that, because I think that it sort of challenges an assumption about a child that they don't know as much as an adult, or I'm just wondering, like, when you were writing it, it just seems like a kind of a new perspective to go with a child in what I'm guessing to be adult subject matter. And I'm just wondering, what did your editor tell you about that, or what? Because it seems like a lot of times they kind of want to put you in one like preteen lit maybe
right.
for this audience, or that's too young for this adult audience, or how did you kind of manage that?
Right, the girl's point of view. I mean, I think of it as her looking back. This is how I think of it, and I think different readers will have a different approach. I think of it as her looking back, but she's looking back so intently that she's also kind of going back. So she is both at that age and old enough to have some reflective sense of it at the same time. I mean, that's kind of how I felt in a certain way writing it, I think. But at the same time, the essence of the character is that she's sort of perceptive beyond her years, I think. So that is helpful in terms of the feeling like she doesn't quite, her perceptions sound older maybe than a 9-year-old. And I think, I mean, it was okay. I felt like my editor was really supportive about it. I think there can be, it's just a fuzzy line if you have a narrator who's young, whether it's looking back, or a narrator who's that age. I think A Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime is a good example of a kid's point of view that I think, beautifully succeeds. So I think there are a lot of books out there like that too. But then, some people feel like there's a line, that line between what is adult fiction, what's young adult fiction is pretty soft, I think. Catcher in the Rye being the primary example, yeah.
I like how Hollywood is sort of small town, and you're like in the park, I was just wondering if you grew up there.
I grew up in Santa Monica, so I'm an LA native, but I've been living in Hollywood, West Hollywood, for 12 years.
So you lived there as an adult, but you sort of see how it could be different things.
Yeah, and I remember, I mean, it was I would take the number 2 bus on Sunset all the way to Sunset in Fairfax. This was probably 1985. And I would walk down, it was a really long walk to Melrose, and go to Aardvarks because I wanted to be Molly Ringwald. So it was like a whole quest to be like, I want that thing that she wore in the movie, whatever. So that Hollywood of 1985 does feel very vivid to me, which did feel different than it does now. I mean, it was grungier in kind of a nice way. In terms of the time of the book, it's a little more fluid, but I think it's influenced by both Hollywood now and Hollywood then. Yeah.
Question now. You teach at USC right now, right?
I do.
Are you familiar with the term Trojan Mafia?
I'm not.
It refers to Brian Grazer Ron Howard, George Lucas, and Robert Zemeckis.
Wow.
Now, would it be presumptuous to assume at this point you attended the UCI writing program? Could you and the people in your class, based on their success, be termed the Anteater Mafia?
I love it. I love the idea also of Anteater Mafia because it sounds like about right for the fiction writer as opposed to, like we're sort of like, yeah, but we're anteaters. We eat ants. Like we don't have a lot of, we're not like Trojans. But yeah, it was an amazing time to be there. And I mean, I was super proud to be part of that whole program. So sure, I'll take it. I'm proud of that. Yeah. I was there 95 through 97. Yeah. Mary Beth.
I have a question about your choice of cake.
Yes. Great question.
Was the lemon like the bittersweetness of it, or did you contemplate another cake? I was curious.
I think it was always just immediately lemon cake. Though someone said like it's rare to have chocolate icing on lemon cake. Is that true? No. I mean, I guess that might be true. I did not know that. It feels like such a good combo. But what do you have? What do you have on lemon cake usually? White? Lemony. I know, there it is. I like that there's a burst. There's like a burst of... Anyway, but so I think it was that lemon is sour, so there is the sourness that has to come in there. Or I told a friend who was like, I feel like you're making a pun on the American adage of make lemonade out of lemons. Because it's true, the book is sort of like, no lemonade will be made. No. They're lemons. They're lemonier lemons. Yes.
Was that the original thought when you started writing? Was it about lemon cake, or do you remember the first thought that got you started writing? I mean, I do. I remember... So this was the first thought piece of it, but let me backtrack to which point of the story. So I got a very nice call from a composer named Harold Meltzer, who wanted to do a piece, and he wanted someone to write words for it. And he had this amazing idea, which is just a really funny idea, so I want to tell you about it, which is that I guess there's a Brecht opera or piece about 7 vices, and so they sing about gluttony, and then they sing about, anyway. So he was like, I feel like in the modern day we don't treat the vices in the same way, so they are the 7 vices that are, like instead of gluttony, it would be anorexia. Instead of pride, it would be sort of false modesty. Instead of anger, it would be passive aggressiveness. It just was so fun to think of, and I think he's right. Like, I think he's really onto something about, we don't have those vices purely anymore, so we have the kind of covert vice, right? So it's like, I will not eat a lot, I will eat nothing. Or the example that I did in the little piece that I wrote, which who knows if it'll ever happen, but was making fun of people when for pride. It was when people will say, like, I went to college in Boston, or I went to college in Cambridge. And you're like, can you just say you went to Harvard? It's fine. I'm proud of you. That's great. But they'll be like, no, I went to college in Cambridge. It was great. Where did you go to college? It was a college in Cambridge. Anyway, that has happened with like 5 people I know, lovely people, but I just want them to admit. So that was that exact sort of pride thing. Anyway, so then with gluttony, I think I was thinking about someone who couldn't eat the food she made. And so there was someone who made a lot of food and wouldn't eat it. So she would make food, and then she couldn't ever eat it. And I think that voice, I wrote a little piece, and then the voice ended up sort of feeding into this character who would eat food but couldn't tolerate it. So it was different, but it was somehow connected to that. So it was actually after that phone call that I was happily writing these things, and then maybe the next day it led into this character. Yeah. Sarah.
You choose not to use quotation marks. Is that something you will choose kind of before for a while? Or when you are, do you think of anything in particular? Like, if you're not using quotation marks, you'll in the statement with a gesture, like other things.
I think I'll choose the no quotation marks during. Usually, it'll kind of be that often out of laziness, I won't do quotation marks because I'm writing along and it feels a little quicker to not have to do space, that. And then sometimes I'll go in and add it if it feels like visually I kind of want to separate it out. But often visually it feels like too much on the page. Like they feel kind of very loud visually to me to have the quotation marks. So I would say default is none, and then I'll go in and add them if it feels like it serves the story or the chapter or whatever. And what was the second part?
So then it would be, do you keep things in mind?
Oh, about gestures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like stigmatized, this person is talking, that's not monologue.
Yeah. No, I will. I think you have to kind of, it's like you were saying, you have to kind of mark things a little bit more clearly, or people have to say said more. So sometimes actually when I'm reading, I'll add saids, or I will take out saids when I'm reading out loud to indicate to an audience, because it's hopefully clear on the page, but maybe not. So yeah, and gestures are important, or gestures that indicate which character is actually speaking. You know, a pronoun in there can help. Yes.
Question about that.
Please.
Of invisible sign. How involved in that are you, or were you?
So, Invisible Sign of My Own was, optioned and made into a movie, and I was not at all involved because I just am too much of a control freak, and I just couldn't stand, like, collaborating. So I think that awful word, I think certain collaborations, like with the composer, was great, but I felt like I just didn't know how to do it, and I think it's a really different skill, and so I kind of handed it over completely, and I didn't feel like it was something where I could then be kind of halfway involved, so I just let it be really separate. So I don't actually know where it is in the pipeline, because I think it's done filming, and I check IMDb, and I sort of asked my agent to put out a feeler and find out, but I don't know.
And you separated yourself from it, so you're comfortable with whatever comes back.
Yeah, I actually feel like the more separate I can be, the better, because I feel like adaptations tend to work the best when they become their own thing. So I feel like occasionally it works as like a mirror of the book, but like Tristram Shandy was a great adaptation that held the spirit of the book, and it had nothing to do with the book, and that was a fantastic movie. So I think, I feel like the more freedom, the better for it to become a separate thing, particularly because I think a lot of my characters are really internal, and so there's going to have to be a change in order for it to work as a movie, you know? Feral Joe.
Who's in it?
And Jessica Alba's in it, which is very exciting. You know, I have no idea what that really means, but it's exciting. They have pictures of her on the web holding an axe. That's the best part. That's enough.
All the visual.
Yeah.
Summarize them. That's the visual.
It's called An Invisible Sign of My Own, and the character buys an axe for her birthday, and then, so there's Jessica Alba, like, in this kind of outfit, and all the people on all the websites are like, she looks so frumpy, and I think she looks great. So that's, it's because she's not wearing, like, a little tiny thing. Anyway, so who knows, but it's kind of fun, and strange, and exciting, and weird, and all of that. All right, well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books Author Reading Series. Don't forget that you can check out this and all our other great podcasts at www.skylightbooks.com. Today's music was provided by Ashley and Arlo. You can check them out at MySpace, Facebook, or at the iTunes Music Store. Thanks for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.